I don't ever need to read another Donna Tartt book, I'll tell you that much. Ooh boy! But you should read it. Boring, 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 boring. I'll be the judge of that. Sweetie, what are you doing? It was pretty good. I'm sorry, but I don't care about ゚МcCurdy. They love this book, and I did not. Hi, I'm Sam. There's quite literally no one asking me to do this, but I should be leveling up my D&D character right now for my session later this evening, but I don't want to. So instead, I'm going to tell you about all the books that I read in September and October. Okay, so between September and October, I read 17 books and I DNF'd 3 books. And I think some of the DNFs might be kind of controversial, so don't hate me too much. So the first book that I read was A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This is a book that has been talked about extensively on the internet. I read this for my 24-hour reading vlog, which in hindsight was a bad idea because this chunker is over 800 pages. So the majority of the readathon was spent reading this book. This is about 4 friends who become friends in college. They're all from very different backgrounds, like their families are very different, their professions are all pretty different. So it follows them, basically their post-grad life, and then for many years following, the beginning of their friendship. And a lot of the tragedy circles around one of the friends named Jude, who has just endured a lot of trauma in his life. One would argue maybe sort of impossible amount of trauma, but I would say this story was unlike most of what I read because I don't read a lot of books where you're really just kind of following a set of characters over decades. And there was something kind of nice about that. This was very easy to read despite its length. Hanya Yanagihara is by no means a bad writer. Her writing makes you want to read it. And you can see obviously I annotated some sections. This is one where I didn't think I would want to annotate anything, but then there were just so many lines that I wanted to be able to go back to and remember. And as someone who also deals with a chronic illness, it was really almost gratifying for me to read about Jude's struggles. There were just some lines or some sentiments that he communicated that were they just really spoke to me. A lot of the story does focus on Jude's health issues and sort of the decline over the years. So there's this one quote that says, "But in recent years, as things have gotten worse, he has worked very hard to give up the idea that he will ever improve, and has instead tried to concentrate on and be grateful for the minutes of reprieve, whenever and wherever his body chooses to bestow them." So that definitely hit pretty on the nose for me as well. And then this other quote, "It was impossible to explain to the healthy the logic of the sick, and he didn't have the energy to try." So that is another really relatable sentiment. I found myself feeling a lot more connected to the characters than I thought I would, and especially Jude. So yeah, definitely look up trigger warnings for this one because there is a lot of really heavy content that's discussed in this book. I kind of talked about this more in my 24-hour readathon vlog, but there is some controversy surrounding this book in that people aren't very happy with Hanya Yanagihara's depiction of a disabled person. She didn't do a lot of research or actually talk to any people with disabilities before writing her character with disabilities. There is a ton of discussion about a disabled person struggling because of their disability. But anyway, I liked this a lot more than I thought I would. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. I definitely understand the hype around this. I understand why people like this book so much because it is really well written and I really easily connected to the characters. So yes, check this out if you haven't already. Maybe. Please take care of yourselves. Next, this is another one that I read in my 24-hour readathon vlog. I had 30 minutes left and I was like, crap, what am I gonna read in 30 minutes? So I picked up this graphic novel, and that is The Black Project by Gareth Brookes. So this follows a sort of young teen boy who is really lonely. So he just basically finds a bunch of spare parts around his house and he tries to start building a girlfriend. So the art style for this is really distinct because the author fashioned a lot of the art in this out of embroidery. So it has a really distinct art style. It almost has a spooky vibe to it too, even though I don't think it's technically a horror, just the whole black and white vibe of it. I guess the content of sort of trying to Frankenstein together a girlfriend is a little creepy. So yeah, this was a quick little read. It was pretty good. I think if the art style weren't so unique, I probably wouldn't be keeping this one, but I do really appreciate how unique the art style is. So I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars, and you should check it out if you're interested. Okay, next is one I'm really nervous to talk about because it's one that everyone on the internet loves. They love it. They love this book, and I did not. So this is one that I listened to on audiobook, and that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This is the original dark academia book. This like sort of started that whole trend. We're from the point of view of this kid from California, I think. And he is going to this like preppy, posh East Coast school, gets in with this weird small group of these classics students, so pretentious and pompous. It's not that I don't like dark academia, because I do in some instances, but this was literally just like a bunch of rich white kids complaining about how miserable they are, but then like not doing anything to make themselves less miserable. It was just really hard for me to empathize with them. And honestly, this book did not need to be as long as it is. And I get that the whole like length of it and like the whole structure of the story, it's supposed to be modeled after like a really long Greek tragedy. I just don't feel like it was worth it. I don't think it was that good. It was fine. So many parts felt like such a slog, so slow to get through. How are we not through this part yet? I don't ever need to read another Donna Tartt book, I'll tell you that much. There's one character in this who is like so blatantly misogynistic, homophobic, and racist. It didn't have to be that way. I get that she probably wrote him that way because she wanted us to not like him, but that just kind of seems lazy to me. That's not like a really well-crafted character to me. I just don't want or need to be reading a character saying blatantly misogynistic, homophobic, or racist shit. So I have better things to read, you know? I don't really get why the internet is like foaming at the mouth over this book. If you've read it and you loved it, what am I missing? What did I miss? Apart from the contributions that this book made to the dark academia genre as a whole, as a standalone book, I don't think that it deserves nearly as much of the hype as it gets. That's that on that. Okay, another book that everyone on the internet has been foaming at the mouth over is I'm Glad My Mom Died by ゚McCurdy. But this is one that I actually thought was pretty good, and I think it does deserve the hype that it's getting. For those of you who don't know, this is a memoir by ゚McCurdy about her time growing up as a child actress and sort of being pressured into acting by her abusive, controlling mother. So I'm not usually a memoir girly. I think that a lot of people who love memoirs are probably the people who really love celebrity culture. And I guess that's not really my thing as much, but I think it's really a testament to her writing that I'm really not the type of person like, I'm sorry, but I don't care about ゚McCurdy. I'm familiar with iCarly, but it's not like I was even like a huge fan of the show. And it's a testament to her writing that I liked it as much as I did because I felt so interested by the story the whole time. From the very first page, I was committed. I wanted to hear more. So I found this to be a really interesting and well-written memoir, especially since this is the first thing that she's ever written. I also listened to this on audiobook, and this is read by ゚McCurdy. I think it was really special that she was able to read it because there were certain parts where as she was reading, you could tell that she was tearing up. So then it just kind of like made it that much more emotional and impactful. Also, Dan Schneider, if I see you on the street, it's freaking on site, man. You freaking pervy piece of shit. So yeah, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and you should read it if you wanna. Next, I listened to another audiobook, and this is one that I don't remember how I heard of it, but probably some corner of the internet that I stumbled onto, and people were like, this book is so good. And I was like, I'll be the judge of that. So this is We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. In hindsight, I don't think I'm the target audience for this, so I probably just shouldn't have even read this, but I did, and I didn't really like it. So this is about a beautiful and distinguished family, a private island, a brilliant damaged girl, a passionate political boy, a group of 4 friends, the Liars, whose friendship turns destructive, a revolution, an accident, a secret, lies upon lies, true love, the truth. So that's pretty vague. So of course it's like this freaking young adult like suspense thriller novel. I have a very sordid relationship with thrillers. I typically don't like them. Every time I read one, I'm like, why did I read that? I didn't like it. And that was the case with this too. I guess my main issue was with the twist in this. It's just like been done before and been done way better. I only gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars, and that's it. Okay, so we had some stinkers, but now we're gonna talk about a really good one. And that is Gone to See the Riverman by Christopher Triana. Hoo boy. This was pretty disturbing. Main character, don't remember her name, somehow got into correspondence with this serial killer. who's in jail. He's in prison. And they've been exchanging letters. And he's like, hey, I need you to do me this favor. I need you to go to this remote location and do this task for me at this location. You need to find this person, sending her on a quest into like the rural woods, creepy woods. And she's like, sure, yeah, I'll do it. And this whole time she's like, you know, there are people who become like these girls, these groupies who become obsessed with serial killers, and I'm not like them. And it's like, yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. That's exactly what you are. But anyway, she also is a full-time caretaker for her older sister who like had this accident when they were kids. So she takes care of her sister, but since she's going for like a few days, she has to bring her sister with her. So this whole book is like the creeping dread of her going on this mission. And you as the reader, you're like, sweetie, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, what made you this way? We get more of her backstory. We learn more about the sister's accident. And this was another one that I was just like riveted. And I really liked the ending too. This was like creepy. And then the end was like, it was pretty good. So yeah, I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. Definitely pretty extreme though. So definitely check trigger warnings. Check trigger warnings for any of these books before you try reading them. This one is very extreme, but you should read it. If you can, you should read it because it's good. And it's creepy and it's scary. Okay, and then I read another short little horror book. And this is one that I think a lot of people also said that was really disturbing to them, but I read this and I didn't like it. And I was like, what? What was that? And that is We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. This was my first book by him that I've read. And this is about a family who don't get along. It's like mom, dad, brother, sister. They don't get along. There's like a severe weather warning. So they have to like take shelter in their bathroom and they're stuck in the bathroom. And I think like a tree falls or something and basically like barricades them into the bathroom. The whole book is just like them fighting in the bathroom, having to like endure each other's presence, descending into mania. Which the premise, when I say it, sounds so promising, but I just didn't like the execution of it. It left me more confused than anything. I think the author made it more confusing because he didn't settle on like one type of horror or even just like a couple types of horror, trying to do too much at one time. He was trying to include all of these different subgenres of horror, but then I was just like, what is going on? So by the end, like I couldn't even tell you what actually happened. I have no idea. He just made it too convoluted. I can't say I recommend this one, but some people who have read this, they do like it. So I guess maybe check it out if you're intrigued, but I did not like it. Next to our DNFs. The first one is one that I tried so hard to get through. It seems like people who read this really like it, but I just like could not get through it. I was so bored by it. That is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. So I was really trying to force this, and it's not even that long of a book. It's pretty short, but I don't know. I just like could not get through it. So this is a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. So basically our main character is this soldier named Alex, and they get this letter from their old friend. And so Alex goes to the house to be like, yo, what's going on? You seem like you're not doing well. And then like Madeline and her brother like look awful. Like they look terrible. Like they're on their deathbeds. So Alex is like, what's going on? I think eventually the house is like creepy, something with like mushrooms, but I just like could not get into this book. I tried so many times, but every time I would like go to pick it up, I would just be like, God, I wish I was reading literally anything but this. So I put it down. I don't know if it's a hard DNF. I guess if you read this and you liked it, should I finish it? Should I go back to it? Should I try the audiobook? Is that better? Please provide some guidance. Thank you. Okay, my next DNF was These Fleeting Shadows by Kate Alice Marshall. This was purported to be a mixture between The Haunting of Hill House and Knives Out, which I love Knives Out, and I've never read Haunting of Hill House, but I do love a haunted house story, so I feel like this should have been a slam dunk for me, but this was another one where I was just like, boring. Why is nothing happening? So basically this young girl, her grandfather dies, and it's like the side of her family that she's like estranged from. They go back for the funeral, and then they're like, oh, the literal entire estate we're leaving to this teenage girl who we've never even met her. But we're leaving it to her. She takes it because she's always felt really weird and like she's never been able to explain how she feels and whatever. I don't know. And it's clear they were trying to set up some like haunted house story, like some like family mystery thing, but I just was so bored. And I think I got like 35 or 40% of the way through. This is another one I listened to on audiobook. So that's like another thing. If I'm listening to this on audiobook, that means I'm listening to this at work while I'm working. So it has to be pretty boring for me to not even want to have it on as just like background noise. And this is one where I was like, no, I'd rather just not listen to anything. So not my thing, but if you read it and you liked it, I'm happy for you, and I wish you nothing but the best. Okay, next we got another short horror novella that I read. This one surprised me. So this is To Be Devoured by Sara Tantlinger. Kind of sounds like a bad word. Tantlinger. Okay, what does carrion taste like? Andy has to know. The vultures circling outside her home taunt and invite her to come understand the secrets hiding in their banquet of decay. Fascination morphs into an obsessive need to know what the vultures know. Andy turns to Dr. Fawning, but even the therapist cannot help her comprehend the secrets she's buried beneath anger-induced blackouts. Her girlfriend Luna tries to help Andy battle her inner darkness and infatuation with the vultures. However, the desire to taste dead flesh, to stitch together wings of her own and become one with the flock, sends Andy down a twisted, unforgivable path. Once she understands the secrets the vultures conceal, she must decide between abandoning the birds of prey or risk turning her loved ones into nothing more than meals to be devoured. Oh, yeah, that makes it sound really good, and it was. Synopsis: chef's kiss. Cover: chef's kiss. Story: execution: chef's kiss. This was a grody one, folks. This was a gross one. I mean, I think you can kind of like infer from the synopsis what gross things might be happening, but definitely look up trigger warnings for this before you read it, because she do be grody. She do be grody. But yeah, read it if you want to, because it was good. Next, I read a relatively new horror release, and that is Anybody Home by Michael Seidlinger. This is like home invasion horror, but it's from the perspective of the home invader. So there's this like cult. They contract other people to invade homes and basically like record the process and record them toying with the victims, and the beginning when they enter the home to the end when they make their getaway, if you know what I mean. So this reminded me a lot of The Strangers, Funny Games, that kind of thing. It wasn't like a 5-star banger for me. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It did leave me wanting a little bit more. The writing was fine. The way that it was written was as like this conversation between this new home invader and his like boss, I guess. And I think that dynamic and that like structure for the story was a little weird for me. Wasn't a total hit, but it was still really good, and I still recommend it. So if that sounds good to you, you should read it. Okay, next was another kind of like sort of a bummer. So that is Chameleon in a Candy Store. It is a sequel to the book Diary of an Oxygen Thief by Anonymous, which you probably have seen because this has been all over the internet as well. And this whole series is basically just like a male manipulator being a male manipulator, and yeah, so it's like, who wants to read about that, right? But what I liked about the first one is that it was like, here's this really awful guy, and then he was like suffering the whole time. So it was like, yeah, you deserve this, and I'm happy to read about it. But then in the second one, in Chameleon in a Candy Store, it was like, hey, remember me? I'm still a shit guy, but this time I'm not really having any bad consequences for my actions. So it's just like, I didn't need this. I didn't need this. This book didn't need to exist. Yeah, it was bad. I didn't like it. I don't think you should read it. If you want to, I think you should read the first one. I like the first one. I own it. So yeah, I do like the first one. I don't think it needed a sequel. Next, we got another 5-star banger, and that is The Laws of the Skies by Gregor Courtois. I read this on an airplane, which I would not recommend because there were so many different times where I was like reading stuff and I was like, my fellow passengers probably thought that I was like a flight risk, but I was really just reading this really extremely graphic, violent, horrific book, which I loved. So this follows a group of 6-year-olds, young kids, on a field trip into the forest for a camping trip. Basically, things just go from bad to worse. Yeah, so this one line from the blurb. One by one, happily ever after evaporates for the children and their chaperones, as, one by one, like all nature's creatures, they must learn the laws of the skies. So yeah, this is like Lord of the Flies on steroids. I really liked this one. It was so graphic and so gory, but in a really satisfying way. Highly recommend this one, but yeah, definitely check content warnings. All right, I feel like we keep going back and forth between like a good one and then a bad one, and then a good one and then a bad one. So this is one that was not a hit for me. We're back to another bad one. So this is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, translated by Geoffrey Trousselot. This is sort of like cozy cozy Japanese slice of life with sci-fi elements. So basically there is this cafe where there's this one table in this one spot where if you sit in it and are served your coffee, you can go back to a specific date and time that you think of. The only caveat is that you have to drink your coffee before it gets cold in order to return to the present. Otherwise, you're stuck. I think you become a ghost or something like that. We follow a few different characters who have like intertwining stories. Basically, we follow them and they're like reasons for wanting to go back and sort of like try and resolve their unfinished business. And I listened to this on audiobook and it was just like really not that great. I think the only enjoyment I got out of this is that the majority of it takes place in this cafe. So there is this like cozy cafe feeling. And as someone who loves coffee, there were a lot of descriptions of the taste and the smell of coffee. So I guess that was like kind of enjoyable to me, but the story was not really that great. I thought it was kind of boring. I didn't really like the writing. I felt like the dialogue was really like stilted. Yeah, it was kind of forgettable, to be completely honest. Okay, next I read another memoir, and that is another super buzzy one, which is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. Listen to this on audiobook. This is another one that's narrated by the author. So she is the lead singer and like, I think guitarist of Japanese Breakfast, the band. It's like mostly her adult life, but she like was reflecting back on like her young life too. And it's her dealing with the grief of losing her mom. So yeah, it was a really interesting memoir because she had a pretty complicated relationship with her mom before her mom passed. Yeah, it was just very sad. Very sad. There's a lot of really graphic descriptions of death. Not even in like a gory way, but just like there are just a lot of really graphic depictions of illness and someone who's just like wasting away from cancer. You know, I wasn't bothered by how graphic it was, but I also wasn't expecting it, especially from like a memoir. But I think this book is another one that deserves the hype that it's getting because it is very beautifully written. I think you should read it. Next, I read a couple Junji Ito short story collections, which both got 5 out of 5 stars because I'm a little Junji Ito. So I read Lovesickness and Deserter, and they were really good. Lovesickness I wasn't expecting to like as much as I did. It's a lot of really creepy imagery. It's like Junji Ito in like top form. So yes, I really liked Lovesickness. You should read it. And then also Deserter. This one had like some insane body horror. Basically, there's like another version of him inside of himself who's trying to like turn him inside out so that he can be on the outside. Pretty gross. Pretty gross. Most of these are Junji Ito's like older art style, so there was just something kind of like nostalgic feeling about those because when I first started reading Junji Ito, I started out with like his really old stuff, so it just kind of reminds me of being a kid again, reading his gory weird stuff. So you should read it. Next, I listened to a thriller called The Push by Ashley Audrain. I guess it's not really like a thriller. It's more of like a psychological like family drama. Our main character is a woman who she has her daughter and she's like happy with her family, her husband and her daughter. But then as her daughter gets older, she's like, something doesn't seem really right with you. But then she's like, oh, my mom was just like not a good mom. So maybe it's just like genetic. Maybe I'm just not a good mom. So then she just kind of like grits her teeth and bears through it. But then she has a son and it feels very different with this son. She's like, man, he's awesome. I love him. And then she's like, okay, yeah, maybe I'm just like finally settling into motherhood. But then this tragedy happens. And it basically makes her confront what is going on with my family. This reminded me a lot of the book Baby Teeth by Zoe Stage. It does seem like Ashley Audrain and Zoe Stage maybe got like the same prompt and then they like each wrote their own story. But yeah, this was a pretty satisfying read. The ending was pretty fun. It was good. The next one that I read is Dear Laura by Gemma Amor. This is another short little horror novella, and it is about a woman who gets these letters from a man claiming to know what happened to her friend who went missing when they were kids. So she gets a letter every year on her birthday, and he's like, hey, I'll give you a little hint about where your friend is if you give me something of yours. Each birthday she kind of has to like give more and more. It just ends up like consuming her whole life. This was pretty short but pretty effective. It was good. I gave it 4 stars. I think that the writing was pretty good and the story was interesting, but it's not one that I think I ever need to reread. I just don't feel like it left like that much of an impression on me, but I would recommend it. And then my last one is a DNF, so a little anticlimactic to end on a DNF, but this is one that I tried to listen to on audiobook and I just like could not vibe with the humor. So that is John Dies at the End by David Wong. And I'm surprised, well, no, not really. I'm not that surprised. But basically going into this, I thought that the humor would be for me, but it felt like young boy humor. Like middle school boy humor. The humor kind of reminded me of like when I was a kid and I used to read Mad magazine, or I would like see it at the library. It's sort of that same like gross out, yeah, just like disgusting middle school boy humor. And even as a kid, I was like, this is like not funny. So I think it's just like not for me. It's just like not really my humor, but I like the idea of a story that's like horror and also just like so unpredictable and like funny at parts. So like I was on board for that, but then like I just got really bogged down by all the like middle school boy humor. So I was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna call it quits. So I don't see myself picking it back up. I totally get why people like it. I get the appeal, but I think that it's just not my kind of humor. That is everything I read in September and October. Okay, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Watch my other videos if you want. Subscribe if you want. I would love to have ya. Like, comment, do anything you want to do. And thank you for being here. And I love you. Okay, goodbye.